over to new TV where you'll have audio. It does not appear as though we have anyone signed up for public comment. So we can move directly to the consent agenda, which is approving our 4-1 regular meeting minutes and a one-day liquor license for the Cabot Spring Fling. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Paul.
Second.
Moved by Paul, second by An Ping. Is there any other discussion? We'll do a roll call vote. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3.
Chris, if I can interrupt just 1
Yes.
second, I've been told by New TV that just need to talk really closely to the mics tonight.
Okay.
The feed is really low.
Okay, noted. We will all get right in there to make our comments. All right. Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes.
Ward 8.
Yes.
And Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
And the consent agenda passes 9-0. All right. Moving on, we have a report from Dr. Nolan.
Hi, everyone. Just a hodgepodge of updates from the principals today. So first, we, the central staff, and I have been meeting with all of the schools, faculty, and staff to just process post-strike and clear the air about issues that may be on top of mind for our staff, to hear from our staff, their experiences, their thoughts, and answer questions. We have 2 schools left, and we are processing next steps together, working with our Newton Teachers Association partners to decide next steps so we can productively conduct the working groups that we all negotiated as part of the contract. And I just wanted the public to know that the number one question the school committee and I are receiving at the PTO coffees that we are doing is, what are you all doing to ensure that this does not happen again? And I want everyone to know that that work has started and has been very productive and positive thus far. So more to come when I've finished all the visits. Also, just want to say the city council's been very proactive in thinking about next steps for the city. Hattie Goodwin from the mayor's office is also working with us just to think about how can we all be a part of next steps to rejuvenate the hope, respect, and trust within the city. So I think we've taken some small steps towards a really bright future, and I think everyone's invested in learning from the last few months. So I just wanted to say that because it's the number one question. I was just at Whole Foods and someone stopped me in the grocery store, and I said I really should say something at large. So more to come once our union leadership and our groups have made some decisions about next steps. I did want to say I had a fantastic day at North today. Chair Bresky and school committee member Davenport did join for the school PTO meeting, and then Chair Bresky did visit some classes with us, and then I went on to visit more classes and just visit with the staff and met many of our students and our interns from North who've been working in the public relations office. So just a wonderful day, lots of strong teaching, really nice day. Wanted you to know that our school resource officers have been presenting cyber safety presentations to 7th graders at Brown. In addition, at Brown Middle School, Anti-Defamation League training has occurred recently. In addition, both teams at Oak Hill and Brown for the Tenacity Challenge have been succeeding well at the state level. 7 Newton Public School students from grades 4 to 6, representing Ward, Pierce, Oak Hill, were nominated to the Massachusetts Music Educator Association's All-State Treble Chorus and performed with their peers from across the state last weekend in Worcester. It was conducted by Rebecca Kennelly, current chair of the Performing Arts at Endicott, who even told them that it was the best group of children's singers she had ever had the pleasure to work with, right? I knew it. Horace Mann and Forge are hosting a story night next week for families. Fifth graders will read stories about our diverse community to younger students in small groups with a chat and a hot cocoa to go with it. Elementary schools are all finishing up their parent-teacher conferences this week. We also track the success and attendance at those, which will be reported in our upcoming annual report, so the school committee can see we have high parent engagement and parent conferences here. It's really amazing to see. For the second year in a row, we've blown the competition away and had the second number of highest qualifying teams for national finals in the math modeling competitions. This is a huge compliment to advisor Michelle McDonald, Math Department Chair Jen Letourneau, and the Math Department as a whole. Various student-led days have been occurring at both high schools. Today, I attended the Asian American Culture Day at North. It was a full house, and there were student panels, there were community member panels just sharing the experience of being an Asian American in Newton. And it was really, I think, quite a transformative, very supportive experience. Students go of their own volition and are brought by teachers, depending on their free blocks. So it was a really nice day to see. Author, illustrator Oji Mora visited several elementary schools as part of the Creative Arts and Sciences these past few days to share her beautifully illustrated books, inspire students, and continue them to grow as writers. Related to our hate prevention grant, Urban Improv made its last stop to all the middle schools, visiting Bigelow this week, addressing microaggressions, biases of all types with sixth grade students. So that's been very popular. I always interview middle school students when I'm over there. And also all of the middle schools have completed their peer leader training programs using the hate prevention grant through the ADL. And also, in breaking news, slime has been banned at Ward as of this week, and I
am aware.
Yeah, it's traumatic.
Possibly
That would have been
responsible.
devastating in my elementary household, so you now have all the news.
Thank you for that very, very important update on the slime. Is there any questions or comments for Dr. Nolan?
Did the students from North get to New Orleans? Do you know?
They were delayed. I'm still waiting to hear of their final arrival. It looks like a 10:50 departure at the place they were delayed at, but everyone's good, and it's a good lesson in entertaining yourself for 8 hours.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nolan. We will move on to.
I forgot one other thing.
Yes,
Sorry.
please, go ahead.
How could I forget? So our leader contingency heads to China tomorrow to the Jingshang School. For community members who don't know, Newton Public Schools has the oldest Chinese exchange in the country. It is well established, the royalty of exchanges, if you will. Very few schools do exchanges to the depth and productivity that Newton does. Many schools do, week-long visits back and forth. I myself was part of those types of visits, and I taught for a week in Chinese schools back in 2014. This is a much more robust partnership, and both of our high school principals have gone there along with Assistant Superintendent Romer, and we really are excited for this partnership to be back in action, and our students and staff visiting each other, learning from each other, and having the option of that international experience.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the budget review. So we've been through it. We've had four meetings to go through the various components of the budget. I think we had a good discussion about it at our last meeting. I don't know how the committee wants to proceed at this point. There was a suggestion that perhaps we move to a final vote as opposed to a straw vote this evening. I don't know if there's any thoughts or objections to that. Rajiv, go ahead.
I do think, again, we went through the budgetary items in multiple phases, including while working to resolve the strike. Paul's suggestion at the last meeting that that we're probably at the right place, I think is a good one. I haven't received personally any emails from the community asking questions about specific budget items. If any of you have, we can certainly discuss those. I have not. We also didn't have public commenters coming in last week, in the last meeting for this. So I'm certainly comfortable with us proceeding to the full vote. I just want to make sure in case there's been any community outreach that we address those questions. So.
Any topics that folks had coming from the community they'd like to bring forth? I've received really nothing. Okay. Well, does someone want to put forward a motion? Paul?
I'd be delighted. Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the fiscal year 25 budget as presented to the school committee by the superintendent.
Okay. Motion is
Second.
by Paul and second by Tamika. Is there further discussion? Yes, Anping.
I just quickly reviewed the most important executive summary, and I was really impressed. And so I'd like to say a few things. I'm very relieved and grateful that we got this budget passed with 5% increase compared last year. This is almost miracle. With city leadership, mayor's office, and the city council, and with MPS leadership and everybody chipping after this historical, teacher strike. So I thought this miracle, and also I'm very happy to see the focus on the budget, as Dr. Nolan mentioned a few times, and other people also agree. The budget is statement of values, and I'm very happy to see that the focus on the mental health for the elementary schools, that was well recognized. That's the number one concern. Many people, community stakeholders have that, and I also strongly agree. And then also on the academic achievement, which is also very important, and we have heard loud and clear from community. And the last one is the strengthen the high school curriculum in STEM. And I'm very happy to see these three focuses in our budget. I know there are many, many other priorities, but I fully agree these should be our focus. And again, I'm also very happy to see the high emphasis on the quality curriculum. And that's something I think it's time to review and to strengthen the curriculum, the highest quality resources for our students' curriculum, and I think, and assessment. I would totally agree and strongly support that. And it's not easy. Let's face that. Curriculum innovation and reform is never easy, and could be very controversial sometimes. We went through this past few years. But I think this is the time to do that. And I probably would like to say 50 years ago, Newton school system had the curriculum innovation, which helped to put Newton on the state and national scene. And I think this is the time to do that. Past quite a few years, we did not have a chance or commitment to do that curriculum renovation or innovation and curriculum enhancement. This is the time with the budget, with this 5% increase. So again, I want to say I'm very encouraged with this budget, especially after this historical event happening just a few months ago. So let's hope that with our new leadership, Dr. Nolan, and with the committee's support, and I think we have good chance this time we will make Newton, as many people reminded us again in the letter sent to us, hundreds if not thousands of letters sent us, we moved to Newton because of quality system. So this is the time for us to redouble our efforts to make these things happening. And this wonderful beginning, I'm so happy and so relieved we would have this strong budget. And probably a few months ago, no one would dare to think that would be the case. So I just like to make some statement. Thanks.
Thank you, Anping. And I can say from our meeting at Newton North this morning, there was a very different tone than, visiting that building this time of year in past years when you're adding staff as opposed to cutting staff. So I think it's felt throughout the entire school community. Other comments? Okay. Let's take a roll call vote then on approving the for year 25 budget. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes.
Ward 8.
Yes.
Ward 9, Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
That passes 9-0, and the for year 25 budget is approved. I would like to thank Dr. Nolan and Liam and Sean, Alyssa, and the whole team for all the hard work that went into this and made this really just a smooth process this year, even though it doesn't feel like spring outside. All right. We only have one other item on the agenda tonight, and that's a discussion of our private school busing. And there was a memo distributed from Liam. Although, I would like to point out, this really, was sort of brought forth by the committee based on, originally the discussion last fall about adding buses to help service the student population. And I think for a lot of us, that was kind of the first time we even realized exactly how this worked and the extent to which it was happening and working. So, we, through the course of the budget, have asked the administration to, come up with, maybe some options here as to how we think about this in the future. I kind of see the potential range of outcomes here as being, we can choose to do nothing and the status quo holds. We can, on the other end of the spectrum, as is our understanding of the law, have the ability to provide busing to our private school students in Newton only to the extent that that private school is closer to their home than their assigned school, or what their assigned school within the district would be. And then, I guess there's a potential of options in between. I think from what I heard from the committee, a lot of the big piece of this comes down to the fact that we provide a service to private school students that we don't provide to our own NPS students. If a student chooses through our own program to not attend their assigned school and applies to the district to attend a different NPS school, that student is not eligible for busing. But if that student were to choose to attend a private school, they would be eligible for busing, and if they live more than 2 miles from that private school, in fact, they would be able to get that busing without cost at the elementary level. So I think, I'd like this to be a discussion of, our general thoughts on this topic, what we think potential outcomes of this discussion should be, and potentially even if we choose to go and change some portion or all of this program, when we think we should do that. Did I frame that pretty accurately? Mm-hmm. Okay. Paul, please.
Thanks, Chris. I've been giving this a lot of thought. I know everybody has. And what I'd like to suggest is, in my opinion, now is not the time to vote on making this change. And let me give two reasons. One is a social reason, which is that these children and their parents, and indeed the schools that they attend, are valuable members of our community. And I think that there may be an opportunity with some quiet discussions to reach an accommodation that doesn't look like a one-sided vote by this body. And I think as a general matter, I know Mayor Fuller, you've adopted this approach in your administration, where it's possible for people to work through their differences and come to an accommodation, sometimes a compromise, that often leads to a better result. And I feel like we haven't done that yet. So that's one reason, just as a matter of being respectful to our fellow members of the community, the educational community, and our residents. The other is a legal reason, and here I speak carefully, not being a lawyer. I know we have several in the room, but I've looked at the documents that are the basis for this memo. I've read the Essex decision. The Essex decision is not on point, and therefore the DESE advisory memo is not on point to the issue we face. The issue in Essex was that they had no public school within their district. So they were busing all the children to a neighboring district. And the issue before the court at the time was, to what extent does Essex, as a district, to what extent is it required to pay for the transportation of those students going to private school? And the court basically said, if I can paraphrase it in the way I read it, certainly the legislature didn't intend that students from Essex could expect free transportation all the way to Springfield, that there had to be some reasonable boundaries for that. And so the court came up with this concept of they should pay for transportation up to a distance that those students would have gone if they had gone to the public school. But that case was solely about out-of-district transportation. It did not establish a standard, a like standard for in-district transportation for private students. Therefore, there is no guidance from beyond the law or from the court as to what the appropriate standard is for the kind of in-district transportation we're offering. I'd also like to say that as much as I respect the people who wrote the advisory opinion, DESE has no role in this matter. They have no authority. The authority lies with the legislature and any court decisions. And as I read the DESE letter, it was based on their interpretation of the Essex decision, which is, I say, in my opinion, is wrong. So I think we're left with a kind of a legal vacuum on this matter. We could come up with a standard, but as my friends who are lawyers like to say, hard cases make bad law. And if we are taken to court for having adopted a standard that is found to be unworkable or illegal or inappropriate, we might find that there are ramifications from that lawsuit that would be unpleasant to us. So for that reason too, but really for the primary reason that I started with, these are members of our community. Let's just try to work it out with them in a way that's satisfactory to them, to us, that meets our budgetary needs, that meets Regina's scheduling needs for the buses, and just try that. Even if that means we don't put in place a change for this coming school year, that it might take several months longer than that, I think it would be worthwhile going down that path. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Paul. Other thoughts? Ping?
Eliane, thanks for this memo, which make this case really easy, understandable now. Yeah, I kind of struggle with this rationale. If we offer these non-required bus service to the private school students, and meanwhile, we do not offer this service to our public school students. And that sounds a little bit gap here, and how to justify, I found it's hard. If parents ask us, how do you justify? We do not get these services, those students. And on the other hand, I understand for those parents who send kids to private schools for whatever reasons, they probably financially save city some money. You know, that could be the argument. Now my question is, how much money are we talking about if we do not provide all those service to the private school students? And here we have quite numbers about 131 students. So if we stop providing service, only have 2 students, almost all these students. So what's the rough ballpark of this budget we can save?
Thank you, Ping. And this is, you've raised a good point. The piece on this is that it's actually not a savings for us, but it would allow us to use the 5 buses in the morning and the 6 buses in the afternoon to address timeliness and kind of crowding issues that we have for our current buses. So we're not able to reduce that total number of buses by 5 buses, or so we would utilize those buses in a different way. So it's not per se a savings for us, but it's a utilization of those buses in a way that would help the public schools. The only kind of piece that I would add to that is and I don't see Regina joining us here. The other argument I guess I could say is that, you know, we'll be under pressure, and I think we're looking at transportation routing software. There is some pressure that we may need to add a bus at some point in the next year or the following year, and to the extent that those buses were free to us, that would have the benefit of not maybe needing to add that bus at some point into the future. So, but in this first year, there's really not a savings to us, but a benefit really just in terms of utilization for our public school riders. I hope that's clear.
Just quickly, if adding 1 bus, how much money would?
Sorry, yeah, so 1 bus is approximately $120,000. And that's everything. That's the driver, the fuel, the maintenance, the insurance. That's kind of our contracted rate with Eastern Bus.
Thanks.
Tamika?
Thanks, Chris. Excuse me. Should have had something to drink.
Contagious.
Yeah. So, Paul, I think you raised an interesting question, and one which in due diligence should be explored. Absolutely, full stop. We have at our disposal general counsel for the Newton Public Schools. We also have at our disposal outside legal guidance and advice from Liz Valero and her firm that we can access. I think doing those things, and I will throw into our partners at City Hall, which have from time to time been ready and willing to provide additional legal analysis as well. So I think a combination of those things seems more than merited to analyze and really deeply probe some of the questions that you've raised around the extent of the prior guidance from DESE and the scope of the Essex decision. That being said, I think if I'm going to put myself in a time machine and think back to when we started as a district going above and beyond what is legally required of a public school in terms of transportation for its private school students, I think at that time there was no squeeze, if you will. There was no crowding out of the services that we as a district are obligated to provide to students attending our public schools. Probably at that time, and I'm just again envisioning what it might have been like to make that decision, probably at that time it was something that was easy to accommodate, or certainly not posing a difficulty or a strain upon our transportation system across our district. However, that time has shifted drastically. We are now in a position where our athletic students are being asked to be transported by their coaches, by a parent, by someone else. And you want to talk about liability. I'm thinking about the liability of doing just that and the safety of our students potentially being impacted. Thank you. You are the best. You are the best. Thank you. Thank you, Aisha Farag, for the water. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Anna Nolan, for the water. Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Hold the. Aisha has the best water in her office. All right. Yeah. Oh, thank you. You're welcome. Where was I? So our students are being, their needs are being really severely impacted by our constrained ability to meet the transportational needs of the district. High school athletics are being compromised. Middle school athletics are being really impacted. Students are taking longer times to get from point A to point B. And then when I think about the parity of what this kind of accommodation has created, it is an unequal utilization of our services, where our private school students are being able to access transportation in a way that our public school students are not. And I understand that we've been getting a number of emails from private school parents, and I think that's wonderful. They should be able to let us know what their thoughts are and what their needs are, and they should feel free to share those with us. However, I will correct something that we've been reading through those emails, which is that this is taking away a right. We are not looking to take away a right or curtail a privilege. What we are trying to do is to meet the requirements of state law, to meet them, not to exceed them, because we now see that today, in this day and age, we can no longer do that without having severe impact on our district and our students. We are looking to meet what is required and not go beyond that, because we can no longer do that without a burden to our district. So it's not taking away a right, it's about following the law to the letter of the law. And I think, sure, Paul, let's explore the analysis and do that. That's a good idea. But in the meantime, we should have this rich discussion. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tamika. Amy, then Barry.
Liam, there are a handful of students who would still qualify based on the legal requirement. What does it look like to eliminate the additional transportation and still provide transportation for them?
So on the memo on page 2, it's really, it's down to, I think, 1 to 2 students possibly that would qualify. And what we would do, and we do this right now, for I think the Pheasant, one of our Pheasant students, is that we would actually look to possibly have a student, again, that, again, with this kind of this idea of kind of being no closer or as close to their public school as their private school, if they were within that zone, same or under, we would potentially look to have either a middle school or an elementary school pick up the public school students, and as well, or potentially a middle school pick up a rider and drop that student first at their school and then drop at one of our middle school or elementary schools. So we would basically be utilizing those buses probably in a more efficient manner than they're just kind of basically all alone right now.
Thanks. I agree with actually both Paul and Tamika. I think it's important for us to have this discussion. I think it's inappropriate to have a discussion that would impact students for school year 25, given that we've just passed a budget that doesn't include purchasing an additional bus. I don't think we're at the highest point of squeeze, and so I think we should continue to consider this for school year 26. I say that because there are families who may have applied to private schools elsewhere, but saw that they would be able to have transportation for next year in Newton and made a different choice. And so I think that it's really close to September for us to be pulling the rug out from families. And I think it's worth considering seriously for school year 26. My question for follow-up is whether there's precedent for other districts doing something like this. If I think about like our neighbors in Brookline, where there are very many private schools in Brookline, I'd be curious to hear if they provide a service that's commensurate with what we do currently.
Yeah, I can find out. I'm not aware. I know Brookline for many years actually did not have a lot of busing. A lot of their busing was either actually public transportation. I think Lexington a number of years ago, and I think that's cited here, tried to eliminate, and I think has eliminated this. So I could do a little survey from other communities to see what they have. I think again, Newton is unique with the fact that we've got this number of private schools within the community.
Thank you, Amy. Barry?
Yeah, I basically agree with what everyone else is saying too. I think that we need to have the opportunity to offer something that is within the law and to the same degree that our public school students receive. I just have one question because I'm not clear on this. Right now, a public school family student pays $400 for the bus, right?
Yeah.
And a private school, for their bus, they're paying nothing?
No, they would still pay. We actually do have private school families that pay, and I think that we do the same kind of benchmark. If they are under 2 miles from their private school, they would actually be required to pay. So the big piece to understand for public school and private school riders, my understanding kind of with the law, is the same rights and privileges. So we try to apply the same standard we do for our
Yeah.
public school and our private school
So, but
riders.
because most of them are over 2 miles,
Yes.
they're not, but they're not over 2 miles from their public school.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That helps. I think that it, I just think it warrants the opportunity to dig into this further. We should be complying with the law, but we should not be doing something where our public school students are not having space in their own buses because we're going above and beyond. And I agree with the piece in potentially affecting families who have already made decisions for the fall.
Thank you. So just if I can clarify that point, just for anyone who's watching, and correct me if I'm wrong, Liam, so last year was the first year we started charging for elementary buses, period. NPS never charged for elementary buses, period. As part of our budget discussion last year, we said we're going to start implementing a fee of $400, which is the fee district-wide, if you are requesting bus service and you live within 2 miles, a 2-mile radius of your assigned private school. So you only pay that $400 fee if you're within 2 miles. If you're beyond 2 miles from your private school, then you do not pay that fee, correct?
That's my understanding, yeah. And I'll confirm that with Regina. Again, she's not able to log on, I think, right now, but I will confirm that. But that's my understanding of how we work that. And that's our rule, which we do for our public school students.
And so therefore, when we're providing this, sort of same rights and privileges concept, when you have a student attending private school that's more than 2 miles from their home, we will not charge them a fee because we don't charge that fee to our NPS students,
That's correct.
despite the fact that, that's a choice. I just want to make sure we're clear on that point. And, again, if you are a public school student who's choosing to go to a different elementary school that is not in your assigned district, we would not provide bus service for you at all,
Correct.
for any price.
And
So
we'll-
Regina is calling me because she can't talk to you otherwise. Do you want to hear from her? Okay. Hi, Regina.
Hi, all.
Hi. So you're on with the school committee and the public by way of my phone.
Okay, and everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We actually did charge a fee at one point to elementary. I believe it was based on a different distance. It might have been a reduced rate, and that is something I can certainly... Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, you're doing great.
Okay.
If you're listening on the TV, you should shut that off because it'll be
Okay.
a delay.
Got it. Hold on. I'm just going to leave. This is going to be a problem because then I won't hear you. You'll just have to relay questions to me.
Yes.
And it's Zoom, so, I mean, it's the thing. Hold on one sec. So sorry, everybody.
Yep. We apologize to everyone at home for the technical difficulties tonight.
Oh, this thing is being so difficult. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. So, we did actually charge a fee to elementary at one point. I think we started out not without a fee for elementary, and I believe we did institute it for a couple of years. I also believe it was reduced. I don't have those details, but I can certainly get them. I was doing some research today and I found the black hole of information. I just didn't have time to go through it all. So I can certainly go back and look and see if I can find that. I think I can find an old application. But there was a fee at one point.
Okay. Do we have other questions for Regina?
I do.
Okay.
I guess here. Regina, I think it was back in 2010 when the school system was facing difficult budgetary problems. And I think Jim Marini was acting superintendent at the time. Do you recall a discussion about these same issues, about changing fees for, or introducing different fees for private school families? Do you recall that?
Did you hear that, Regina?
I recall some conversation about changing what we do as far as transportation for private schools, not about changing the fee. The fee had to stay the same across the board, whether it was private or public school, because we have to offer the same, equal service. So, but I do recall there was some talk about it when Sandy Gurian was CFO, because we were kind of in the same position we are today, where we actually back then it was more the private schools. We could not give private schools the same type of service because their routes had gotten so long. So there was a lot of talk back and forth, a lot of emailing back and forth. And in the end, we did actually I believe we added a bus specifically for the private schools, which was, of course, an added cost. And there was talk at that time about reducing what we do. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember all the details. I did try and find some old documentation, but having changed email systems several times, it's not findable, unfortunately.
Thanks. I was just raising the issue to make the point that this is not the first time this issue has come up, and where there are budgetary constraints and other constraints, and to the extent we can learn from those previous discussions, which I guess are in a black hole somewhere, might be helpful to us today.
Right. Back then, the discussion and the addition of the bus was, I believe, primarily for private schools. Right now, we have problems with private schools and the public schools. I really need 2 buses at a minimum. Even then, I don't know if it's going to solve all problems, especially when it comes to the private schools. I have families right now waiting for stops that I can't squeeze in. I've got 3. I got a 4th email today. There's just no time available. So even the private schools are at the point where they need an additional bus as well. So I feel like it's bigger this time around than it was before.
Thank you.
Sure.
Emily, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I had Liam, a quick question about the high school students, the private school high school students who I know are paying bus fees.
Yeah.
In the list that goes from many to very few, how many of them are they all high school students' fees? Like, what's the story with fees?
So most of these riders, Regina might help out, most of these are actually more on the elementary level of our riders that ride this. Regina, do you know the ridership level? What we've talked about is more K.
The majority of them are grades K to 6. We have, Solomon Schechter does go to 8th grade. There's probably a few 7th and 8th graders that are paying. And as far as the only high school we have that we're transporting to now is Newton Country Day. And I want to say we might have 2 students that are using the bus to Newton Country Day. 3 at the most, but I think it's 2.
You had mentioned them, high schoolers paying fees in a previous, I think the first time we talked about this. And so I was just wondering what the scope is, and it sounds like
Very
it's
small.
not big.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate quickly as to kind of why we're in the place that we're in right now and how we got, like, why this, my understanding from people who, from long ago, who have shared with me why we're doing this. And the concept was we could take a student and we could drive them 1.6 miles, which is how long it is from their house to where their public elementary school is, and then we could just drop them off, but that would be terrible because they'd be 5 miles away from their school. And so I think there was a feeling, and you're correct, that there was not as much of a enrollment over capacity issue when that decision was made, that there was a feeling of they don't go to the public schools, this is the new Mass General Law, and we can do it, so let's do it. And so I think that's why we're where we're at. And I think it's worth reiterating to the public and to us as a body why we're here. My last point is that I completely agree with what Paul and Amy has said in terms of this is not the time to be making changes. Like we need to give this some time. We need to you know, we've had a small trickle of public feedback about this so far, but I suspect that we're going to get a heck of a lot more as we dive into this further. So I think this is the beginning of a longer conversation.
Thank you, Emily. Oh, Mayor Fuller.
This is an important and worthy conversation. Could I ask, I agree, by the way, let's do a deep dive on this and really understand it. I'll repeat some points that others have made, but I'll also just add one more that hasn't been mentioned yet, but will ring true. Many of us understand that transporting students, whether it's to public school or private school by bus, is much better in so many ways than having private vehicles be doing this. We want all the kids actually to end up on buses, including those going to private schools. So that's environmentally what we want. For congestion, that's what we want. So buses are good. It's a good. As we do a deeper dive, I think it would be useful, sorry, Regina, it could be over the summer. I don't think this needs to be done in the rush of the school year, but I think we do need to understand what's the current status of buses for our Newton Public School students. Tell us more about timeliness, tell us more about crowding, tell us more about how many bus stops there are and how inconvenient it is or isn't for children and families. Walk us through the fee structure one more time. I don't remember, I've lost track also. Are there any areas anymore in our bus policies where we are going above and beyond the state requirement? Or was the change in the elementary the last one that got us, I'll say, in conformance with state? I've just lost track. I once kind of knew this inside and out, and I don't. And also in the memo, just outline the fees structure right now at all elementary. I guess it's really through through 6th grade. It's 1, 7th and on. And for both the private school students and the our public students, I oddly enough, read this and said, can we re-examine whether those Newton families who, I'm sure for very good reasons, and with the permission of the Newton's public schools, are having their youngsters at a different Newton public school than the one that they would normally be assigned to? Why aren't we offering them bus service? Is it impossible to offer them bus service? So I actually, sorry for Regina, I'm going backwards. I'm trying to add more students in possibly, but I'd like to
You
re-examine
have the money,
that.
Mayor Fuller.
Sorry, I
You're straight,
don't,
Regina.
Rajiv. This is us, we as a
I'm having
community.
a hard time getting everything.
Sorry,
It's really kind
Rajiv,
of
I'm
muffled,
actually
but,
going to.
I'm happy to provide any information that you all would like. Just for kicks, I can tell you that, things have definitely gotten bigger. I know I was working with Julie McDonough today on the number of routes that our buses do. She was under the impression it was like, I think she said like 64 to 72 daily routes. And we're actually doing, not including late routes, we're doing, I think it was 82 routes every morning, and it's like 75 routes every afternoon. And then there's an additional, I want to say it was like 15 late routes. So it's definitely grown. That's just one little tiny tidbit of information, but I am happy to provide you with it, whatever you need. I have the list of bus stops. Whatever you want, I can get.
And Regina, I believe it, you could probably do it off the top of your head tonight, you're so knowledgeable, but look forward to having it.
So Regina, we took notes. I know it was a little muffled there, but Liam and I have the full list.
Excellent.
Okay.
That's great.
If I could add a couple more,
Here comes
And
more.
sorry.
Okay, I'm going to hang up with you, though, because this is confusing, I think, and we'll just give it.
Hope it is, I am a member of the school committee, and if I bring up something that involves costs, I hope it doesn't get thrown in my face that because I'm the mayor, therefore I'm not allowed to mention anything that involves cost. I'm guessing that isn't quite, that was more of a joke than anything, but
If I may
just
respond,
minute.
that was a clearly unsuccessful attempt at humor.
All
and
good.
And I
All
apologize for
good.
that.
Yeah.
And I do have some comments to make, and I'll
Yeah.
wait for my turn, but it was not intended
All good.
to be
Thank you.
anything negative.
I also, and this may be a legal question to understand, but I think can we nail down or clarify whether it is possible to offer the private school families busing at a higher charge than what public school students, I don't know what the legal question, they think, but again, that's not for tonight, just in a longer member when we do a full dive. And it'd also be useful, how many Newton Public Schools students are not getting transportation for us because their students are not in their local school? I just don't know if that's 5 kids or 50, I just don't. So I really look forward to hearing more and diving deep into this. And I know we are the Newton Public School Committee, and our focus, first and foremost, must be on our public school students. I will just say, as I think others have said here tonight, I'm echoing it. We are a community, though, so that these are children who live here and families who live here. These are our neighbors, even if for many reasons somebody chooses a private school. So I think we have to think about that, too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. To one of the points you made, it was a discussion I had with a couple people today of, is there a path where we do provide busing for any student who chooses not to attend their assigned school, whether they go to a private school or whether they go to another NPS school, and perhaps for that entire universe, public or private, there's a different fee structure in place. So therefore, it is not discriminatory in any way. We are providing the exact same rights and privileges, but we're doing it in a way that potentially becomes a little bit more manageable from a budgetary perspective. That was a conversation, and I don't know what the answer to that is, but it was a path I had kind of discussed with a couple of folks today. Rajiv, did you? Oh, sorry. Yep.
I don't think anybody who was on the listening heard that, but the, our council was made sure that we knew that it had to be the same rights and privileges as public school students. Thank you.
Rajiv, I believe you had a comment.
Yes, thank you. A couple of thoughts on this. Like you, Chris, the idea that we were providing this service was something I wasn't aware of, and we found out when there was a request for an additional $120,000 or so for an additional bus, and I realized it wasn't for that it was for private school students, and that we were providing this service that was above and beyond what's required. So it's great to hear everyone's perspectives, and often as Ward 1 I end up having to speak first, or I just choose to speak first, whatever that might be. But so first, Paul, I appreciate the legal research you did, but I feel like we operate under DESE guidance, and if the DESE guidance offers us something, we can certainly wonder if it's legally sound, and I would defer to attorneys on that one, but I'm not sure we can necessarily say we've received the guidance, we're not going to follow it, or at least meet it if I also have read the opinion, didn't come to the same conclusions, but I'm an engineer, not an attorney. So take that for what you will. I do think the discussion we had earlier was fairly clear, that there's a certain requirement that we have to meet. If we choose to go beyond it, we can. I feel like there's a fairness issue. This is not an equity issue, it's a fairness issue, where right now, I know families that moved within Newton, and in order not to displace the social fabric that their kids had at the other elementary school or middle school, chose to continue having their kids attend that school, and then had to deal with the transportation. And that is one of many reasons why a student may choose to attend a different school. But it does happen, and families deal with that, and it's not necessarily easy. The structure we have right now is not fair. So I think we need to address that fairness. It doesn't seem like we're going to address it now. I don't know if there's ever a good time to address it. There may be a good time to address it with changes not taking place for long enough that it allows families who are affected in any way to adjust. That's what I would suggest. I also think we are in a situation right now where in areas where we have been going above and beyond, and this includes, I think it was the Medicare Part B payments for one thing, we have had to pull back and make sure that we're doing the best we can to meet the needs of all our students. That requires fairness. As I mentioned in the previous meeting, we have reports, like Facebook is not trustworthy, but there are ongoing complaints about crowding, about students being forced to sit in potentially unsafe locations on the bus and so on. I don't trust Facebook surveys. I don't necessarily, I don't trust pretty much anything on Facebook. But this has been consistent enough that there's something going on which is challenging, and Regina has kind of confirmed that. We are having a tough time currently meeting our requirements to get our students to school in a safe and reasonably uncrowded manner. So I do think we need to figure out what to do here. I think we can look at a lot of data and analytics. I don't know that it matters. It's what's the policy in place that is consistent across all our students, those that attend NPS and those that do not. So will additional analysis and a deep dive tell us anything different about consistency or fairness? I don't think so. I'm hoping to be surprised, but we can certainly do that deep dive and see where it goes.
Okay, thank you. Paul, did you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry?
Amy?
I still want to go back to what Regina said on the phone and what Jill said from the crowd, that we have to offer equal service, and whether or not charging fees that are not equal across Newton residents is an equal service, regardless of where those kids go to school. So she was saying that in 2010, the decisions that they had to make hinged on being required to provide equal service. And so I think, like Jill, you sort of offered that that is the standard, but could you explain whether or not?
Can I clarify? Because I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, that's my
So,
question.
Yeah, if you look at Chapter 76, Section 1, it talks about this concept of same rights and privileges, but that's referring to the universe of private students that you're busing relative to the universe of public students that you're busing. I don't know that extends that, well, I mean, as a for instance, we don't provide the same bus service
Right.
to students that are all public students. It depends where you live, what school you're going to, how far away, whether you chose to go to a different school. So even the law has, you don't have to provide that service within certain distances for private students at different grade levels. So I think inherently it doesn't, that concept isn't universal within a public school population, but I interpreted this statute to say that same rights and privileges was applying the universe of private attending students and the universe of public attending students. So I think that's where you were going, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just
Yeah,
would
I
like to
mean,
hear you talk more.
I would just say that statute and the guidance from DESE and the not antiquated, but decades
Joe,
old.
can you talk, because I know
decades
they're having
old-
trouble on new TV
old
hearing this.
case law, it was all in the context of private rights and privileges of private school students in transportation vis-a-vis the public school, not within the public school. Not saying that that's not a factor or consideration, but in terms of how this law and how we've been discussing it really is just about how it applies to transportation private school students that live in Newton. And just, I think to kind of summarize what I think some people were saying, and maybe oversimplify it, if we just take the example of students that are attending, basically, they're non-zoned public school, elementary is the easiest one because there's multiple, and because we do provide transportation for a bulk of elementary versus high school students. If we were to say provide that service, extend that service that we currently don't have for those students and charge them double, if that's where the community wants, then that similarly would be, the discussion would be that, would you do that for private school students because they're essentially going across town as well, right? So I think it would have to be more in the context of what you're doing here has to be what you're doing there. And to Paul's point, the guidance is old, the case law is old, but these are the metrics that have been used, at least at this point in terms of rights and privileges, is the metrics of miles, right? And here now we're talking about fees. Those are objective measurements that we can turn to
at least at this point in time, to determine the same rights and privileges and extent.
Yeah, I guess where I'm struggling is it already feels like we're out of compliance with what you just said. And so,
I don't agree with that legally, that we're out of compliance with that. I think that district-wide, policy-wise, whatever decisions are made, what you do within the students in the district. Now, remember, this has nothing to do with students that are attending citywide programs or anything like that.
Yes.
That's a different, wholly different subgroup of students with transportation. But you're not currently providing, well, one would say you're providing the private school students more.
that is what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right?
So-
If I send my child to Williams,
Mhm.
I cannot get a bus.
Correct.
And if I send my child to Mount Alvernia, I can.
Correct.
Yeah, that,
So
it,
one thing that's
I'm done now.
strangely,
Paul can ask his question.
strangely, and this is not the most finely worded statute I
This
think
is a
I've ever
fun
read in
meeting,
my
I just
life.
want to say.
The statute says that kids attending private schools shall be entitled to the same rights and privileges as to transportation as public schools. It does not say the inverse.
The invert, yeah.
If you take this at its most literal reading,
Well, if we did
The
that,
statute
we
says-
wouldn't be busing them.
the statute says that private school kids have to get everything that public school kids get, but public school kids don't have to get everything that private school kids get. I'm pretty sure that wasn't the intent of the legislature when they drafted this, but I mean, that is sort of how it reads. So, I mean, look, I think you're bringing up the point of, which is, I think what sticks for a lot of us, of, you know, this kind of just doesn't sit well, that we're providing a service for private school kids that we refuse to provide for NPS kids. Like, that feels really wrong. I don't know how to fix that other than, you know, you give more to the public school kids or you give less to the private school kids. I mean, that's kind of the reality of the situation. So, you know, I think to your point, to a lot of the points we heard, you know, and I did talk to, by the way, I reached out to the heads of schools of all the public school, private schools in Newton. I had a couple conversations with a few of them, and the ones most directly impacted, you know, they're concerned. This is going to be very, very disruptive for their school and for some of those families. You know, to that point, like, I think there is merit in not thinking about this for September of 25, and I know you and some others have said that.
September 24.
So, September 24, sorry, yes. There is merit in sort of taking that off the table. I know when this first came up back in October, you know, I was thinking about we got to resolve this by January when those deposit checks are due, because those people are going to be, that's a very informed part of their decision making. So I don't know, though, how we can further solve this for this coming year. And, you know, if we're going to say, let's think about this and study this and you know, go through the logistics, the legal, every different variable, and we'll make a decision for September of 25, I don't know that there's a good solution for this year, and you know, there isn't, right? I mean, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts of how we get how we solve that issue of fairness for this year, or do we just have to live with this sticking in our craw for another year until we come up with a better solution? Yes.
I don't have any quick solutions, and, you know, I have one solution on our part. I think there needs to be more rigorous checking of who's on our buses. I think that is vice principal duties, principal duties. That was my normal work, that boarding the buses. I'm not saying they're not doing that, but we probably can go, and Regina's probably going to turn green when I say this, but there are ways to color code tags and passes, and I know we don't like to do that because it took time and all of that, but there are ways to smoke out who's not supposed to be on our buses. And my worry is that Regina is doing the best she can to get exactly the right number of people on the bus, and kids are kids and they do what they want to do, and it's creating these crowding situations that Regina's reading about on Facebook. So that's a management of kids issue, and so I think we can handle some of that. The second thing is we have to be good to our private school partners in this. It's April of the year of them matriculating. They aren't going to be able to come up with anything quickly. No, all the bus bids have just closed. I don't think we're leaving them with any good. There's no magic private school bus either, right? They're not going to be able to, we can barely command any buses and we're the big payers. So I just want to say, I think we're out of the barn too late on this particular issue. It sounds like we're going to do some more research and come to another decision, but for peace of mind for these families and kids, I think we're really doing them a disservice for that right now to pull that bus service.
Okay. Tamika, Paul, Anping.
Thanks. So I think I happen to agree with the timing, and that's through no fault of anyone in this room. We were a little busy after our initial conversations in October. And so I don't want us to lose this as a thread that we are going to follow up on and pick up on. And so as we kind of finalize this conversation, I'm not saying I'm the last word because, I don't like to be the last word. Funny. I think we need to put a placeholder out there. Is it January? When is it that we make a decision on this? As we're having those quiet conversations, Paul, that you mentioned, as we are thinking about how to comply, not exceed, but to comply with the law, because exceeding is something we can't do right now without severely compromising our own internal operations for our students, without compromising their safety, their joy of doing all of the extracurriculars, all of the things. And so I think, yes, we'll pause decision-making right now. We'll shore up some folks that there's no need to worry that next year is going to be an immediate change. However, we do have to start thinking about what that change is. And the last piece I wanted to say is that in my litany of things, when I put myself in my time machine as to when this was first adopted, it was probably just too complicated to figure out and to decouple and to make work. And I would say that's true now as it was then. It's complicated. But just because it's complicated, we are not in a position where we can just sit on our laurels and say, oh, well, we'll just continue hobbling along 2 buses short of where we need to be in order to give our kids good service. Not just service, good service. And we're struggling to do that.
Thank you. Paul?
Thanks. I'd like to be a little more direct. The idea that an engineer and an economist, on the one hand, on the other hand, so that's 3 opinions between the 2 of us, are here talking about legal interpretations is just silly. In the future, Dr. Nolan, when a recommendation comes to us making an assertion that we're either in or out of legal compliance, I believe it should be accompanied by a rigorous analysis from our general counsel or other counsel so that we can rely on it. We don't have that right now. This document, for example, Liam, no offense to you, cites Mass General Laws Chapter 76, Section 1. There's a quote there. The quote is all about out-of-boundary, out-of-district transportation, which is not the issue we're talking about. And so to read that quote and say we're out of compliance with the law is just wrong. And I think we need to be much more rigorous and thoughtful about this. Emily made the point that there's a lot of community interest in this, and there will be more so as this moves along. It's not unheard of for a district to be sued by members of the community when they take a vote on something like this. And if we don't have our ducks in order, and we go to court, and we lose on an issue like this, we've lost twice. One is on the legal issue, and one is on the public confidence in our ability to make a sound decision. So please, Dr. Nolan, in the future, if you can work with your staff to make sure that that these policy decisions are accompanied by a sound legal basis, that would be really helpful.
Sure, only to pinky swear that I need to know the difference between, we just have some questions, could you answer it in a memo, which is what I read this to be, or do we need a legal statement on it? So I'll ask you that question if I'm unclear.
Thank you.
On Ping.
Well, it sounds more and more interesting discussion. One thing I want to make clear, I think both Mayor and Chris, you mentioned that. So for those students who choose to send their kids to public school, not in their own school district, but outside their district, they will not be provided for public transportation. If they want to pay money, can they get public transportation? Even when you use the word refuse, those families will refuse to get the public transportation. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we do not provide transportation for students that attend out of their assigned school district. So I don't know if refuse is the right word, but we just don't have buses that are going from, let's just use an elementary zone. That's, you know, a student that's maybe living in Zervis that
Yeah.
attends Williams. We do not provide buses that go to those other schools.
If they're willing to pay money, no?
No, we just don't have bus routes that go there.
Now that's a serious fair issue. If I'm the parent, I heard this, listen to school committee meeting, and I'll be fumed. And you know, past years it's fine, but now I thought, could you guess how many possible students like that situation?
So we're going to get that number. I don't have the exact number, so I'd like to. I'll get that back to you folks.
Okay, I think we have to address that issue, even one family, because I feel bad for that family. For past years, it's done. But now if we know this situation, and this double standards, fair, equity, you can use whatever term, but I think it's important. But that might cost a little bit more money, that's unfortunate. But I thought, someone already mentioned that, parents, if we hear this situation, we cannot defend our rationale here. And I don't think legally we can defend. And I'm glad that Paul mentioned the legal, economic, and educational. I want to say I'm an educator, and I hate to see some unfair, unequal situations. This is a kind of moral issues now, even though probably I'm sounding a little bit too serious about this, but just in case some families come to my colleagues here, I don't know, we can defend this. And I hope it's not huge financial obligation, but I think we can do something for next year to at least deal with that issues and hopefully, make it a little bit more fair for those parents who are already impacted in past years.
Thank you, Ping. Rajiv?
I very much agree with Paul's statement about wanting a sound legal footing, but also I don't think we provided that guidance to Dr. Nolan when we asked for this, and it was more a matter of asking Liam if he could put together a brief memo on the key points. So I think we need to be more clear in future in terms of what we're looking for. So that's one point. The other is actually to follow up on what both Amy and Anping said. And again, this is an engineer stepping into the legal arena. Just as any changes could be open to legal action by private school students, we might currently be in a situation where we are open to legal action by public school students who are not receiving the equivalent services, right? And that's a key risk. So when I think about this issue, I do agree around timing. Right? The goal is not to make a decision and push through execution of anything. We need to provide sufficient time for any changes, if there are any, to be worked on and dealt with by both the schools and families. But I think there are two risks. One is the legal risk, where I think we've opened ourselves up to this by not having a consistent policy in place across private school and public school students, and that concerns me. And the other is I do think there's a financial implication, and it's one, Liam, that you've referred to it at various points, which is that for public school transportation, Regina would love to have 2 buses, right, to address the issues that she has. And I fully understand that sometimes overcrowding is by excess students getting on the bus. But in terms of Regina's numbers, 2 buses would very much help to address what we have. So that's $240,000. And if we continue providing services to private school students at the same level that we're currently doing it, there already has been a request for 1 additional bus, which would have been another $120,000. So figuring out the policy on this is going to be important, because I don't think the need for those 3 buses goes away. It's still very much there. It's impacting both our private school students and our public school students, and has come up before. So again, fully agree with everything that's been said in terms of timing of any change, and not having it affect families and more so students. However, there may be legal issues. There are certainly kind of looming financial issues, which is why stepping carefully through this with a good understanding of the legal structure, but getting to some kind of decision would be good. Amy has been incredibly patient while I spoke.
Thank you, Rajiv. Amy, go ahead.
No one's ever said that about me before, so thank you. Rookie question, should we make a motion that we're going to keep this policy in place for the 2025 school year? Because I often hear families say, would you just come out and make a statement that you're not gonna do it by X date?
Yeah, I mean,
Is that a thing I should do? Do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I don't think a motion is necessary to carry forward the status quo.
Yes.
I
So
think
can we
we've-
just say we're
I
gonna
think
do
we've
that?
said, I think there's consensus among us that, this isn't a change that should happen for September of 2024,
Right.
and at the earliest would be September of 2025. Is that a fair statement amongst?
Well,
Barry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
though, can we also put a deadline and when we will make a decision on
So
this?
I was just going to say that.
I was gonna
think-
say, I don't think we should slow down the conversation.
Yep.
June 2024 seems like a great time to make a decision about September 2025 to me.
Yeah, I mean, given the scope of what we're talking about now, as we think about, the legal, the logistical, I think to this by the end of this year. But again, I'm thinking about this as, the next real inflection point, I think, is when those deposits are due in January, and giving ample time. So, I think I would, want to say no later than October.
I would say it's probably earlier than deposits, because people are gonna apply based on location, so it's probably a little bit earlier.
That's why I'm thinking October, maybe, as a time frame to come to a decision here. And we might want to think about this as well in terms of, Regina's talking about the need for incremental buses to really be able to provide the level of service that we want. Maybe firming that up. What does that look like? How will that work from a budgetary perspective? And wrapping that into this conversation and putting those couple different pieces of the puzzle together. That's kind of where my head's at.
So by October of 2024, we will make a decision about how this policy proceeds.
That is,
So
I
to the
think,
members of the public, there is no change on private school busing for this upcoming school year ending June 2025.
correct.
Chris?
Yes. Timothy, go ahead.
If I could make the suggestion to Amy's point about notifying people, the 11 folks who are on the Zoom and the however many who are watching on New TV, notwithstanding, it might be good to first, respond to some of the emails that have come in, and second, to push out in some of the other communication platforms that we have available to us, that this is a decision the school committee has held on, though we are exploring options with an anticipated decision October.
Yep, but my thought is I will reach back out to those heads of schools I've spoken with and communicate that message to them tomorrow, make sure that they're aware of it, and they can push it out to their respective communities. All right. I think this was a good discussion that we needed to have, so I'm glad we did. I think we have a better sense of kind of how to move forward with this. Keep in mind, an October decision of the committee will require us to probably start addressing the issue in a public session in September to give ample time to, you know, discuss it, have the community hear it, and hear their input. So we'll kind of keep that in mind for the calendar. Any other last thoughts? Okay, well, thank you very much. We are adjourned.
Welcome.